Hey guys, in this course you will learn how to create your very own Endless Runner game. You will learn all the basic functionalities of an Endless Runner game, such as player movement, ground spawner, power-ups, and a high score tracker. You will also learn how to make multiple scenes in Unity Editor, such as a main menu, and also an in-game scene. On top of that, you will learn how to code dynamic functions with C# in our game to make it come alive. See you in the lectures! Hey guys, my name is William and I'm going to be your instructor for this course. I've been creating games, apps, and websites for many years now, but my true passion lies with teaching others how to create them even more. If you have not checked out our official website, redfoolstudio.com, go right ahead. We have plenty more content just like this on there. Now without further ado, let's jump right in and begin the course. Alright, so in this section we're going to do the setup for our game. We're going to start off creating a new 2D Unity project. Then we're going to go ahead and create a couple folders, one for art, one for prefabs, one for scenes, and then also one for scripts. Last but not least, we're going to set the screen size for our game. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, so in Unity Hub, we're going to go ahead and create our new project. We're going to go up to the top right New Project button, select that. Then we're going to go ahead and select the 2D core at the top. Perfect. On the right, let's give our project a name. I'm going to call this Endless Runner. There we go. Make sure it's in the correct location you want. Select your cloud organizations. Then also you can turn off Connect to Cloud if you want to. That's up to you. Then go ahead and just hit Create Project. Awesome. Let's let that load. Alright, looks like my project loaded up. Perfect. Now we currently have a scenes folder in our main assets folder. Now we need to add a couple more in here. So let's add those real quick. Let's right click over here. Let's go up to Create. Let's go to Folder. Let's call this one Art, capital A. Awesome. Let's create another one also, right click, go up to Create, go to Folder. We'll call this one Prefabs, capital P. Awesome. Let's go ahead again, right click, let's go to Create, let's go all the way up to Folder. This one would be for our scripts, so let's go ahead, capital S, Scripts. Awesome. Alright, perfect. Next thing we need to do is adjust the screen size. So let's go ahead and make sure you're in the Game tab right here, not the Scenes tab, okay? So in Game tab, we're going to select this right here, which is going to be a drop down for all our screen sizes, okay? Now the first thing you want to do is actually turn off this low resolution aspect ratios. Basically this is going to help it be at the highest resolution for your computer, which is kind of nice. It's going to make all the assets and art be what it should be, okay? So make sure that's turned off. Next thing we're going to do is change to 16:9 aspect. Now if you don't have this, you can simply add it right down here by selecting the plus button. Make sure the type though is changed to aspect ratio, and then you can put 16 and 9 for the X and Y value, okay? I'm going to hit cancel though because I already have it here. I'm just simply going to select it, and there we go. Awesome. Alright, so far so good. Alright, so in this section we're going to go over all the imports for our game. I've attached the imports to the description of the video, so go ahead and download those. It's going to be a zip file, so make sure you right click and hit extract all before dragging and dropping into the game. Alright, once you do that, we're going to go ahead and ensure the sizing is correct. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, so I've already downloaded the zip, extracted all the images, and dragged and dropped each one into the art folder. So make sure you've done that. Once you do, go ahead, double click into your art folder. You should have two images, a square and also a triangle image. Let's go ahead and select the square image first. We're going to change a couple things for it. Make sure the sprite mode is set to single. We're going to go ahead and change the pixels per unit though to 16. We're going to also change the filter mode to point, and all point does is basically make it match the pixels a little better. So make sure you have that set. And last but not least, we're going to change the compression from normal quality to none, okay? Make sure you set that and go ahead and hit apply, alright? Awesome. Alright, let's go ahead and go to the scene view and see how it looks. Let's drag and drop it into the scene, and it should look just like that, okay? Perfect. Let's go ahead and select triangle now. We're going to change a couple things for triangle. We're going to actually set the sprite mode to multiple. Alright, and we're doing that just so we can get the nice little square around the image. So it looks like that, okay? Awesome. Next up is we're actually going to keep the pixels per unit at 100, unlike the square, which was at 16, so keep it at 100 here. We are though going to change the filter mode to point, so it kind of matches up with the square style. And last but not least, we're going to change the compression to none, okay? Make sure you have that set. Go ahead, hit apply, and there you go. Now let's go ahead and drag and drop this into the scene. It's going to be a little big, so we're going to have to adjust it. Make sure you're selecting it right over here. Once you're selecting it, let's change the scale. So we're going to change the X value to 0.17, and And we're also going to change the Y value to 0.17. All right, so you should have two images that look just like this. Once you do that, let's go ahead and highlight both of them and move them out of the scene view. Okay, awesome. All right, make sure you save. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the menu background. We're going to start off by creating the background objects, then we're going to align each object, and then we're going to go ahead and add a particle system to add some effects in the background. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's start off creating the ground. So let's go ahead and select our current square we have here. Let's Control D for it, and we're going to put that somewhere up there. But before we go ahead and start creating the ground, we need to create an empty object to put all the ground objects inside of. So let's go ahead and right click over here, create empty, and we can name this new object ground. All right, now we can go ahead and drag and drop in the new square we have into the ground object. Perfect. Let's go ahead and make the position of the ground square 0x and 0y, so it's exactly on top of the parent object ground. Awesome. Let's move that up here as well. Oop, looks like I didn't move the ground. Let me Control Z that. Make sure to move the actual ground parent object up, just like that. Awesome. So we have both objects together. All right. Next thing we need to do is, of course, make the actual ground layer. So we need to make it kind of a little bit longer than the actual screen. So I'm going to go ahead and move it over here, and then we can track and see how long it is. So let's go ahead now and select the square. Before we start duplicating the square block, let's go ahead and set a couple things. First thing we want to add is a new tag, and that's going to be block. I already added that tag. For you to add that tag, simply go to the add tag, click on the little plus button and add block there, and then save that, and then go back to the square, open up that tagging and select the block. All right, awesome. Once you have the block tag selected, let's go ahead and add a couple other things. Let's add another component. We're going to add a box collider 2D. We're going to actually have two box collider 2Ds on this, one for the actual box itself, and then one for a triggering effect that we're going to use for our player touching the blocks and changing the colors. So the first block, the only thing we want to change for it is we want to go ahead and set the size. Instead of the x equaling 1, we want to do 0.9. And then for the y, we also want to set that to 0.9, okay? And you'll see why this is important later on. The next thing, of course, is add the next box collider 2D. So now we have two box collider 2Ds on the same square. We want to go ahead and keep this one at the value of x1 and y1. But the one thing we are going to change is this is trigger. Make sure that's checked, okay? Awesome. So once you have that there, you should be good. Next thing we're going to do is, of course, start the duplication. So let's select the main one here, Control D, move that over. Make sure you're still holding down Control when you use the move tool so it doesn't move it without the same distance. And then all you want to do is make sure it's still connected. So you just want to make sure there's no line in between, okay? So I'm going to keep going until I have a couple more. And then to make the whole thing faster, we can simply just select all of them and then Control D them to move them over. All right, I'm going to do like one more, I think. Let's go ahead and just hold the bottom one here, hold down Shift, and then select the top one there. Perfect. Then simply Control D, and there we go. We have a duplication of all those. Awesome. And the same length. Perfect. Let's go ahead and Control D again. And there we go. Awesome. So now we have the good length for the ground. Doesn't have to be perfect or exactly the same as mine, just as long as it's about the same length, okay? Awesome. All right, so once we have all that there, then what we want to do is we want to simply move it down. So make sure you're selecting the main ground object here. And what we're going to do is put it at somewhere such as maybe a y value of -1. I think that should be a good one because we want it right below the center, which is that little camera symbol there. Select game view, and there we go. That looks pretty good. I like it. Let's go back to scene. Next thing we got to do is, of course, get the main player. So let's go ahead and select the main block we have over here. And what I want to do is Control D it. Awesome. And we're going to go ahead and simply put it right in the middle. So let's make the x value 0 and also the y value 0. Okay, awesome. Then one other thing we could do also is give it a little bit of a turningness. So it kind of looks like it's starting off to turn right when you start the game. So let's go to game view. Let's select the square here. Let's change this to player so we know which block it is specifically. Awesome. We also want to go ahead and give it a box collider as well. Box collider 2D. Awesome. And I think we can keep that just like that. What we do want to do though is change the color. So let's go ahead and make the color a teal color. So I'm going to bring it over to teal here. And I'm simply going to make sure the R is 0, the G is 1, the B is 1, and the A is 1. Okay. Should give you this nice little teal color. Awesome. Next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and rotate it a little bit. So let's turn the Z value. Let's turn it and just till it's about tilted a little bit. So something like that. Okay, we could move it up a little bit too. I think it's a little low, so let's go ahead and take that Y value and move it just a little bit up. Okay, not too much, but just enough. Awesome. Next thing we got to do, of course, is make the ones that already have touched it, which is going to be the ones from here to here. I'm simply going to highlight them all and go to the color button here, select the little tool they have, and select our main block so they all go to the same color. Awesome. So it should look something like this so far. Perfect. Awesome. All right, so now that we have that there, we're going to need one more game object for the spawning of the ground. So let's go ahead and create one. Let's go down, create empty. We're going to call this ground spawner. Awesome. Then what we want to do is make sure the ground spawner is on the same Y value as the ground, because when it spawns it, it's going to put it on the same Y and X value. So let's go ahead and make sure it's the same one. So we did -1 for the ground, so we got to make sure this is also at -1. Perfect. And then simply for now, we can move it over here. We will change the X value specifically on it eventually, but I think for now, I think it should be good. We'll put it right about here. We might change it later on, but I think that should be good. Okay, awesome. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the actual particle system to get a nice little background effect of blocks flying by. So let's do that. Let's right click over here. Let's go to Effects, Particle System, and there we go. Awesome. So let's move this though all the way outside of the screen, which should be somewhere like right here. Awesome. Now let's go ahead and rotate its position real quick. Let's go ahead and make the X value 0, see what that does. Yep. And then the Y value, we're going to set that to 90, I think. Ooh, I guess it's -90, so -90. There we go. Awesome. You should get it facing the right way now. Awesome. All right, next thing we want to do, of course, is change how it's emitting. So let's go down a little bit. Let's go ahead to the shape. Let's change the angle, which is right here. I'm going to change that to, let's make it as wide as the screen, so about that big. And then also the radius, we want to make it the same thing, about the same. Looks like it actually stretches both, so what we want to do is lower the angle so it meets the same. Should be something like that. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of in the same frame. Okay, awesome. Everything else looks pretty good though so far. What we could do next is simply scroll on down all the way, go to the renderer. We're going to change the actual image that's coming out of it. So to do that, we have to set the materials to something else. I'm going to select that little circle on the right of the material, select a default block just like that. Awesome. Another thing we can do also is change the layer, which should be towards the bottom of this part, which is order in layer right over here. Let's make that something like -5, so it's always behind everything. Perfect. And if we go back to the top now, we should go ahead and get the color. And what I want to do is I want to make it pretty close to black, so somewhere about here, not all the way down, but a little close there. We can see how it looks better in game view. All right, let's make it a little lower. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag it a little lower. Something like that I think would look pretty good. You can adjust that as you want, but I think for the style of game we're making, it looks pretty good. Okay, awesome. Next thing, of course, I think they're kind of jumbled up together a little bit, so I kind of want to change how that looks. So let's go ahead and mess with the actual emission of it. So let's do the start speed, or I think it's the, not the duration, looping, pre-warm, start delay. Which one? Simulation speed? It might be that. Let's do a .5 and see what that changes. Nope, that's just going to make it overall slower, so we'll keep that at 1 because I like the speed. Oop, not 2, 1, there we go. Scroll down to the emission, it might be in the emission section. We have rate over time, which is 10. Let's change that to 7 and see how that looks. I think it looks a little better. I like that. Yep, they're not all jumbled up together, so they're coming out a little bit slower. Nice. We can go back to the game view and see how that looks. I think it looks pretty good for what we're making. So I might keep it just like that, okay? Awesome. Let's go back to scene. All right, we can select somewhere else. I think that looks pretty good so far. We have our ground, we have our player, we have our ground spawner, and also our particle system, okay? So far things are looking good. All right, so in this section, we're gonna go ahead and create the main menu UI. So we're gonna start off creating a main menu canvas, then we're gonna add a title text, high score text, and play game button. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So first thing we're going to do, of course, is go ahead and create that canvas. So let's right click over here. Let's go to UI. Let's go ahead and go to canvas. There we go. Let's set a couple things for the canvas settings. So make sure you're selecting the canvas. Let's go ahead and change the render mode right here. We're going to set that to screen space camera. That's just so we don't have to have this big rectangle here. We can actually see the canvas inside of our screen, which is pretty nice. So what we do have to do is drag and drop our camera. So let's grab the camera, drag and drop it into here, and there we go. Awesome. Next setting we're going to do is the UI scale mode. We're going to change it from the constant pixel size to scale with screen size. This just makes it a lot easier to scale with different screen sizes of computers, or even if we turn this into a mobile game, okay? That's why you want to do that. All right, next up though, let's go ahead and start creating the text. So let's right click on canvas. We're going to go ahead and go to UI again. We're going to go to text Mesh Pro. Let's go ahead and add that. It might ask you this little thing here where it asks you to download the essentials. You only need to do this one. You don't need to do the examples and extras if you don't want to. So I'm going to download those real quick. Let that load, might take a second or two. Awesome, I'm going to close it out because I don't want the examples or extras. So I'm going to go ahead now and move my text up. All right, this is going to be the actual text for the title of the game. So let's go ahead and make a name for that. Let's do just title after the end of that, TMP Pro with the parentheses. All right, next up is I'm going to use the rect tool right here just to make it a little bigger. I like it because it will stretch out both the thing for the text and also the overall object itself. Okay, so once we have it about that size, I think that's pretty good, maybe a little bigger, we can go ahead and give it a name now. I'm going to call this just Endless Runner. Awesome. Let's go ahead and make it bold. I'm going to center it out with the alignment edits over here with this one here and also this one here. Perfect. I'm also going to change the color to match our block. I think it will look pretty good. So just one of the colors like that. Awesome. All right, I'm going to make this font a little bigger. Let's see how 120 looks. Might be too big. Yep, let's try just 100. Maybe a little bit less than that. Maybe 80. Still a little big. Let's try 60. Still a little big. Maybe I have to stretch it out a little bit more. Let's try that. Stretch it just a little bit. Let's go ahead and make this 80 again. Let's try that 60 again. Might need to stretch it out more. There we go, perfect. Then I'm going to go ahead and just center it. So I'm going to use the move tool now, scroll up, and for the X position, I'm going to make that 0, and there we go. I might raise it up a little bit though, maybe a little bit just so we can see the text like that. Hit the game view, and there we go, Endless Runner. I like it, looks pretty clean, I like it. Let's go back to scene now. Let's create the rest of the text ones now. So just so we don't have to reset all the text settings, I'm going to take that text there and just Control D on it. I'm going to change the title though. Instead of title, I'm going to change it to HS for high score. And simply, I'm just going to lower it down a little bit. I'm going to change the color. I'm going to change that color to white. So let's go ahead and select it, go all the way up, perfect. I'm going to make this much smaller. I'm going to do, let's try a 35, might be too small. I think it looks pretty good. And simply change this to high score. Awesome. And let's see how that looks in game view. I like it. Go back to scene view. I might move it up a little bit. That's completely up to you though. All right, we're going to duplicate this one more time now and simply go to the top. Instead of just HS, we're just going to do HS lowercase score, just like that. Okay, awesome. And simply, I'm going to change the score to 0 for now. All right, I'm going to scroll this down and simply put it just like that. Go back to game. And there we go. Awesome. We might need to actually lower it a little bit more because I think the G will hit it if it gets a little longer, because the format we're going to do is going to have the minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. So there we go, just a little bit, just like that. And you can adjust that as you want. Maybe I'll go a little bit more just in case. All right, there we go. Perfect. All right, I like that. Awesome. So now let's go ahead and make the button, and then we should be good. All right, for the button, we're going to right click. We're going to go ahead to UI again. We're going to go to button, Text Mesh Pro. All right. Now for our button, I'm going to go ahead and lower that down a little bit there. And simply what we're going to do is actually add a couple images to add a cool little background effect. So we're going to add a canvas, or we're going to go to canvas, right click, go down to UI, go to image. All right, scroll that down a little bit. And for the button, what I'm going to do is I want this to be the same color as our player also. So one of the blocks or the player, there you go. And I'm going to make this like the background of the button. So I'm simply going to go ahead and do image B. I'll just do image B so we know what it is. And I'm going to make it a little bit longer. Let's see what 2 is. It might be too big. We might do a little bit more. Let's try 3 then. 3 will be pretty good. Awesome. All right, I'm going to make the Y value though. Let's do a 0.7. Let's do a 0.8. I like 0.8 better. There we go. 0.8. Awesome. And we're going to add 2 of these now. So Control D. So everything is same, except we're going to go ahead and shrink the y value. So instead of 0.7, we could do maybe 0.6. And then for the x value, we want to increase that a little bit. So let's do 0.3. Let's see what 3.2 looks like. Might be a little big. Let's try 1. If it's too small, we can have 0.5. I think that actually looked pretty good. Awesome. All right, so now that we have this nice little background, we need to put the actual button object in front of those two. Make sure it's still inside the canvas, but in front of it, okay? Then what I want to do is I actually want to take the color of the button and make it completely black, just like that, and take the rectangle tool and simply stretch it. Let's say, actually, you know, instead of stretching it like that, we should just make it bigger with the scale. So what I'm going to do also is take the text out so we don't end up stretching the text. So I'm going to take this text out. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and make this. Let's make this 2. Maybe that might be too big. Yep. So we'll keep it at 1.5 maybe. Let's try 1.7, 0.8. 1.8 looks pretty good. All right. And then simply change this to 1. Let's see what 3 too small. Let's try 1.8. Maybe a little bigger. We'll change this to 2. All right, let's lower the whole thing down to see if it looks any better. It doesn't look bad like that. Maybe a little bit bigger for the Y. We could do 2.2. Let's go ahead and go into the game view, and there we go. Awesome. I think I like that. Okay, doesn't look too bad. Let's go back to scene. All right, if you don't want it to have curved corners like that, we could also just change the material. So we can go ahead and instead of the rounded corner one, we could just change it to the actual straight one, which I think is one of these somewhere. But honestly, I don't care. I think it looks pretty good like that. So I'm going to keep it like that. All right. So I'm going to go ahead now and add the text back into it. There we go. We do, though, want to match the text to the blue. I think will look pretty cool. So let's add the blue color. There we go. Let's go ahead and make this bold as well. And let's go ahead and add the words play game. Play game. Perfect. Let's adjust it. Let's go down to the text. I'm going to make this one the lower one, or maybe keep it as the middle and just readjust it in scene view. So let's go ahead and use the rectangle tool and simply lower it and higher it. Maybe, is it that good or that good? Let's see. That looks pretty centered to me. I don't think I like the size. Let's change that to 35. Too big. We might need to stretch it actually because it's a little small. Make sure you're still in the rectangle tool. Let's make it just go to the size of the button itself. There we go. Let's go back to game. And actually that looks really good. Awesome. All right, perfect. That looks pretty good for our UI. I like it. Awesome. Let's go back to scene. Back up a little bit. Perfect. All right, don't forget to save. So far, so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to go ahead and create the scripts for our menu. We're going to start off creating one for the main menu itself. Then we're also going to create one for the ground motion, and then another one for the ground spawner. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start off with the main menu one itself, and we're actually going to be putting that script on top of our player. So let's go ahead and select our player right now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to scroll on down over here. We're going to go to add component, and we're going to go ahead and just call this one the main menu script. Okay, just like that. Let's go ahead and select the new script, create and add. Let that load. Might take a second for the first time for Visual Studio Code to open up. So let that load. You can see that little wheel on the bottom right loading. All right. Once it loads though, then we'll go ahead and get started. You might have to double click it to open it up, or it will automatically open up. Let's let that load. Looks like it's almost done. Awesome. Once it is, you can go ahead and double click. Might take a second or two again. And there we go. Also, let me pull it over here once it finishes up. All right, there we go. I'm going to put it into the bigger screen. Awesome. All right, so this is going to be the main menu script. So let's go ahead and put in what we need for it. I'm going to copy what I have. And again, don't be shy to use the source code if you need to. No worries. So the first things we're going to add are going to be some top little libraries here. One is going to be the using TMP Pro. That's basically going to help us connect to our TMP Pro stuff like the UI for the text and also the UI for the button. Then we're also going to be using something called using Unity Engine.scene management, and that basically just helps us navigate through different scenes. Now we're currently in the main menu scene, but eventually we're going to add the game scene. So that's why we need this for the play game button. Okay, awesome. So make sure you have those two things here. All right. Awesome. Next up, we're going to add a variable that we're going to be using. So I'm going to copy my variables. I like to put my variables above my void start. So I like to make a little space here. And it's going to be simply right here. We're only going to have one. It's going to be a public text mesh pro UGUI text time. All this is going to be doing is just representing where we're going to have the time itself on the screen. Okay, so we can basically see that high score. All right. So we're going to keep that there. Next thing we're going to add is going to be a simple code to actually play the game and turn the game on play mode, which I'm going to add in void start, because anything in void start is basically going to, of course, start when we start the game. All right, that's going to be a time.timescale equals 1. Now, why are we setting this to 1? And what is this exactly? Time.timescale is basically something we can use in Unity to freeze all animations, all physics, all that stuff. And we're setting it to 1 because we want it in play mode, okay? If we set that to 0, that means we would pause the game. And when are we going to set it to 0? Well, when we're playing the game and we have game over active, okay? But for now, we're going to keep that at 1, okay? Awesome. So make sure you have that down. Perfect. Let me go ahead and add now what we have in the void update. That's going to be everything we have basically that happens over time and continuously happens. So let's go ahead and play this into void update. Awesome. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to set our actual high score text, okay? That's going to be this new variable we're creating called time to display, equaling it to this thing called player perfs. If you've ever used Unity before, player perfs is a simple saving process we can use in Unity to save floats, ints, and strings. You can only save about, I think it's like 22 megabytes, so not a lot of strings, but if you're only saving text, it shouldn't be that bad. All right, now how are we actually getting it? We're using that player perfs.getFloat. And then we're using this thing, which is a key value of high score. So we could use something called setInt or setFloat, and then make sure to give this. You'll see that in later scripts, but for now, all you need to know is this is basically grabbing a saved value with a key value of high score. All right, what we're doing is we're just setting it to a variable named time to display. All right, then we're doing a couple things here. This is basically gonna do our calculations so we can get our high score text into those minutes, seconds, and milliseconds, okay? That's why we have this whole calculation thing here. Now you don't need to understand this exactly if you don't want to. I just simply use this so we can calculate it into what we want. But what it's doing is first is going to calculate our current time, then we're going to calculate the minutes, which is just dividing it by 60, then we're going to grab the seconds, which is of course minusing timesing it by 60, and then last but not least we are getting the milliseconds, which is of course doing this calculation here of time display minus the time times 100. Okay, so all this is doing is basically getting us those minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. Once we have all these values here, then what we're going to do is insert them into our text or time text.text. Okay, this value here, if you remember, this is our one right up here that's going to represent our text that we're using. Okay, awesome. And then of course we need to specify that it's a text. That's why we're doing .text, and then we're equaling it to a $sign into quotes, which allows us to basically enter things inside of it, which is of course milliseconds, which is right here for the zeros, seconds, zeros, and then milliseconds, zeros. Okay, again, you don't need to understand this fully. All this is doing is basically displaying our current high score float into the current time we want. All right, awesome. So make sure you have that down. Last but not least, we are also going to do GameObject.transform.rotate 0 -40 times time.delta time. So all this is doing is actually turning our player. So when we're on the main menu scene, I just want our simple player to be rotating just like he would be in the game itself. Okay, so that's all that's doing, is just rotating our player throughout the play game scene, and you'll see that happening once we get this done. All right, so make sure you have all that down. I'm going to save that there. Perfect. Next thing we're going to do is add the trigger. So this is going to do what we want it to, what the player wants to do when he touches new blocks. He's going to turn them into new colors. So let me paste that code right below. This is outside of the void update, but still inside of the Unity class itself. Okay, so I'm going to paste this right up here. All right, so for our trigger, what we're going to be using is something in Unity, which is a public void on trigger enter 2D. Now this comes into play because we had a trigger box collider on a outside part of the box versus the inside part of the box, which was not triggered. That's why we needed that there. Okay, so once our object is colliding and triggering into that spot that we have for that box, then it's going to check one thing. Of course, it wants to check and make sure that tag is equal to block, which is what we set for all those blocks. If it is equal to block and our player is hitting those blocks, then what we want to do is change the color, and that's what this collision, it's specifying that object that it has that block tag, get component sprite renderer dot color. So we're setting the color of whatever we run into, of the game object get component sprite render color. So all this is doing is just equaling the object we're running into's color by our own color. Okay, awesome. So make sure you have all this down so we can touch the blocks and change their colors into what we want as our own color. Okay, awesome. And then last but not least, we need a simple function for clicking on the button to play the game, and that's going to be this right here. It's going to be a public void. We're calling it play game, and we're using that scene manager library that we downloaded, which is going to be scene manager.load scene and 1. Now, why are we making it 1? Well, because in Unity, our scene count always starts at 0. So our main menu 1 is going to be 0, and the next scene is going to be 1, and this game is only going to have 2 scenes, of course. The main menu scene, which is 0, and then also the game scene, which is going to equal to 1. So that's why we need that code there, okay? Awesome. So make sure you have all this down. Again, remember, you can copy the source code if you need to. No worries. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. Let's let that load. It might take a second or two. Once it does, we can drag and drop in our high score text. So let's go ahead and select the player, and you should see a little area we can drag and drop in for the time text. So let's go ahead and find our text, which is that 0 there. Make sure it's the right one. I think it was the HS score one. So let's take that, drag and drop it right into there. Perfect. All right, so far so good. All right, next up we're going to do the ground script. So let's go ahead and add that. So we're going to go ahead and select our main ground, which is right here. And we're going to go ahead and go to add component. Let's go ahead and call this ground script, just like that. Let's go ahead, new script, create and add, let that load. Once it does, it might automatically open up Visual Studio Code, which mine does that a couple times while it's still loading. Go ahead, double click that script, and there you go. Awesome. All right, this is going to be a pretty small script. We're not going to add too much in here. We're simply going to add one variable right at the top and then a couple little code at the bottom. So I'm going to add that variable real quick. I'm going to add it right up here. I'm going to add one more space. I like it to be a little bit above. All right, so this is going to be a simple public float. And if you remember, a float is simply just like an int, except it can have a decimal place. And we're just going to call this speed because we're going to want to set the speed of the ground, okay? Awesome. So next up, we're going to add one more piece of code, which is the actual movement of the ground itself. So let me get that. That's going to be in our void update because remember, it's going to be continuously moving, so we need it in the update. All right, and how we're going to make it move is we're going to use a transform.position, which is the position of our current object, plus equals a vector 3, which again is a simple x, y, and z value. We're going to use the dot left function, which is just going to make it move left in the game, times the speed we set, times time.delta time, which is just basically the in-game time. So that's how we're continuously moving it throughout the game. Okay, awesome. Make sure you have all that down. Perfect. Once you do, let's go ahead and jump back in to the Unity editor. Let that load. We just want to make sure it loads with no errors. Awesome. And we can actually test that out. So let's go ahead and just hit play. And we should see the actual ground move to the left. Okay, let's let that load. Looks like it's not moving. Oh, we didn't set the speed, that's why. So let's go ahead and select speed, or select the ground and then give it a speed. Let's do something like 3. We can adjust it later on, but for now I think it'll look good. Let's hit play again. And there you go, awesome. So one thing, if you noticed, is it's not turning the actual color, so we need to make sure that's set. So let's go ahead and select the player. Make sure that script is attached. Yes, it is. We need to make sure all the blocks have that tag that we set. I think they should all have the tag, which again is block. Okay, they all have block. Now maybe our player is a little too high up, so we might need to lower him down a little bit. So let's take that player and simply lower it a little bit. Let's hit play again. We might need to add one more thing to the player, but let's make sure and see if this works. All right. You know what we need to add probably is a box or a rigid body. The rigid body gives it physics, so it's not calculating the actual movement. So to do that, simply we have our player here. Scroll down, go to add component, rigid body 2D because it's a 2D game. And what we want to do is set the gravity scale to 0 and the constraints, because we don't want our player to actually move. This is kind of just a standalone. We're going to freeze the X position, and we can also freeze the Y position. Okay, so let's go ahead, hit play, and see if that works now. I think it should work. And there you go, awesome. Now, looks like he's a little too low, that's why it's getting a little jumbled. So we can go ahead and actually raise up a little bit. Maybe a little bit more, something like that should be good. Let's hit play and see how that looks. And there we go, awesome, I like it. Perfect, and we can adjust the speed of the platform later, but for now I like it. All right, let's do the other script now. So far so good. All right, final script is going to be the ground spawner. So let's go ahead and create that script. Let's select our actual game object for the ground spawner, which is right here. What we're going to do is add component. We're going to go ahead and call this just ground spawner script. There we go. New, create and add. Let that load. Awesome. Once it loads up, oh, it didn't load up yet. Minimize that. Let that load. All right, once it does, just double click it, and there we go. Awesome. All right, so we're going to add a couple things in here. It's going to be a little bigger of a script, but not too big. We're going to start off with some variables. So again, we're going to put them right above our void start. I'm going to paste them in right here. All right, so our first variable is a public float, and that is a max time. So basically, we're going to set the max time that we want before we spawn a new object. I'm going to currently set that to 1, but we can change it later on. We also can go ahead and do a private float, and we're going to call that timer, which at first it's going to equal 0, okay, because we want it to instantly spawn a new platform right when the game starts, but then spawn more over time. All right. Next up is a public game object, and these little brackets here are making it into an array. Okay. Now, why do we want it as an array? Because once we get into the game, we want to have multiple ground spawnings. Okay, so different varieties of ground, maybe with different spikes on it, so it makes it harder for the player, so he's not doing the same thing over and over again. Okay, and we're just giving that a name of ground. All right, awesome. All right, once you have that all down, let's go ahead and start off in the void start, because remember, we're going to spawn one right in the void start, and that's going to be from right here. So we have a game object, calling it new ground, and we're going to equal that to a function or a code that we can use in Unity called initiate. Initiate just helps us basically create a new object in the game. Now we have to pass in a couple things. The first thing, of course, is what we're creating, and that is going to be the ground. All right, we know we're just creating the ground, but we of course want to do a random ground. So we have the entire ground here, but then we have another array, and we're passing in Unity engine dot random dot range of starting off as 0 to the ground dot length. Okay, so we're using Unity Engine's functionality and a dot random, which helps us get a random value, but we also need to give that random value a dot range of whatever we set it to, and we know we have starting off at 0, and then we're going to the length of whatever amount we have in here. So if we have something like 5 different ground types, then it's going to get those 5 different ground types and choose in between those different 5 ones. Okay, that's why we need that dot length for it. All right, awesome. So make sure you have that down there. Okay, once you do though, then where are we going to actually initiate it from? And that's going to be what this is down here. We're using the new ground object that we have, dot transform dot position, equaling the transform dot position of our object with this script, because if you remember, we put it on that same y value plus new vector 3 of 0, 0, 0. So this is going to spawn that new ground exactly where the current object is with this script on it. All right. Perfect. So make sure you have that down so we can initiate it. And now we just need to add this same thing with a timer. That's going to be in the void update. So let me go ahead and grab that real quick. Once I got that, I'll explain it. Remember, you can always get this from the source code as well. All right. So in the void update, we have the creating the ground over time. Now, how are we calculating that? We're simply doing an if statement of timer. So we're saying if the timer is greater than the max time set, then we're going to go ahead and do everything we just did right over here. So we're just recreating that entire new ground. The only thing we're changing is these 2 things here. The first one is a destroy new ground, which is the ground we made after 18 seconds. All right. Now, why are we doing this? Well, we don't want to have an infinite amount of objects in our game. It might lag the game or crash it if we create too many objects. Okay. So we need to destroy the object after some time. All right. We could also put this up here, but for now, I just want to keep it here. Okay. Other than that, we also want to set the timer back to 0, okay? Now this down here is actually making the timer go up over time. It's using a timer plus equals time.delta time, which is just the real time. So it's just basically making that timer go up in real time, all right? Awesome. So make sure you have all that down there. You could have just copied these 2 lines again from right here. It's the same thing. So make sure you do that. Awesome. All right, once you got that, let's go ahead and minimize this. Let that load, might take a second or 2. Once it does, then we can drag and drop our ground into it. All right, let's see. Select the actual ground spawner, and there you go. All right, now what we want to do though is reorganize a couple things. We have all our scripts right here. Let's actually put them into our scripts folder. So I'm going to drag that over there. It might open this up. Sometimes it does that. You might need to reopen up your scripts. It might give you this little error here. So go ahead and just close that out. Minimize. Let's drag and drop that into scripts. It's going to do the same thing. I'm going to close that out. Minimize. give it a second, drag and drop that into there, minimize again, or we could just close out the whole thing, minimize, let that load, and simply double click the script and it should just pop up just like it was a second ago. Alright, I'm going to minimize that, let that load. Alright, next thing we need to do is create the prefab so we can actually recreate the ground. So I'm going to go back to the main assets folder here. Let's go back and select the ground spawner. Now we're going to select actually the ground itself. So let's create this into a prefab. To do that, pretty easy. All we got to do is just drag and drop it into the prefab folder. So I'm going to take the ground and drag and drop it into prefabs. There we go. Now one thing you should always do with prefabs is make sure that the Z value is set to 0, because sometimes it'll give a random one, or if you create a empty game object, it might give it a random value as well. So let's select the one here as well, make sure that Z value is set to 0. We can also make sure as well for our ground spawner, make sure that Z value is set to 0 as well. Alright, because in 2D games we really shouldn't be messing with the Z value of the position, because that's going to be more of like an in and out kind of style. Alright, so now that we have the ground prefab, let's select ground spawner and simply drag and drop your ground into here. Let's create a new list item, drag and drop that, perfect. And I think max time of 1 second is going to be a little too fast, so I'm going to actually set that to 4 or maybe 2 for now. We'll set it to 2. We can always adjust that later, because it's going to respawn every 2 seconds. Alright, that might be still too fast, but we'll see what it does. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to hit the play button. We might need to adjust the actual ground and the spawning of it, so we go ahead. We have one here. Looks like we need to make it a little closer. Looks like it's still making it too fast, I think. And also we forgot to change the blue color back, so let's do that as well. Let's select the main ground here. We can double click in it so we can actually edit inside of it. And what I'm going to do is simply just highlight them all just like that. Go to the color coder, make sure it's the same as the other ones, just like that. Oops, looks like I clicked the background, not the actual color. There we go, perfect. Alright, let's go back. It should auto-save if it's set right there. Let's go back over here. And let's go ahead and select the ground spawner again. And I still think 2 seconds was too fast. Let's do 4 seconds. Let's go ahead and hit play. We might need to make the ground speed faster too. We'll have to experiment with it. Alright, we can view it from this here. Looks like it's still going a little fast, but it's not that bad. It might be overlapping a little bit, but I think it's okay. So let's hit game view. I like it. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty smooth. If I remember though, I think the starting one was a little too far away. So what we could do is either move the one here a little closer, or we can move the spawner one. So I'm going to move that just a little bit. Let's hit play again and see how that looks. Let that load. There we go. I like it. Awesome. I think what's going on though is the other one over there was overlapping a little bit. Let's let that load. I kind of like it though. It looks pretty good overall. Awesome. Let's hit play there. One way to fix that, I think what we could do is just change the layering of it. So we could go ahead and just select the current ground we have, not the one in here, but the one over here. We could go ahead and, oh, you know what? I think we actually changed the blue here by accident. Let's go ahead and move this down so I can change that real quick. So if you remember this one here, we want to change, I think it's these couple. So I think it's just these. Change that to that color. I don't want to select all this stuff. Oops. Let's see if I can just grab what I want. Nope, not gonna let me. Alright, we'll just do them individually. Let's change that to that. Change that to that. Change that to that. It's a little tedious, but I think it'll look good by the end of it. Let's go there. And let's go there. Almost done. It's because we have so many things on the screen, I think. Alright, let's keep going. And almost done. One more, or two more actually. I think the other one's showing a little bit on the corner part. Yep. Alright, perfect. There we go. Now I think, let's make sure that's not the same color. Alright, it's not. Good. Alright, I like that. Now one more thing we could do is simply just select all of these. So hold down the shift key, select the bottom one, and just make this layer just one more higher. So I'm going to make it like 1. And I think it should look good now. Let's hit play. Make sure that one's above the other ones. And yep, there we go. I like it. Awesome. We could make this go faster, but I think for our current game it looks pretty good. We could also just slow down the actual square itself if we wanted to. Like it. Nice. Let's go ahead and slow down the block and see how that looks. Let's go to the block script, which is somewhere around here. I guess we never set a public variable, so we can just go into it and change it, which I think was this little turny thing here. So instead of 400, we could do 300. See how that looks. Control save, minimize, and I think we should be good with this. Let's see how it looks. And then we should be good with the main menu section. There we go. I like that. That looks a little bit more nice. Awesome. All right, one more thing to do though before we save and end the main menu part is we need to set the button functionality. So go ahead and open up your canvas and find the button, which is right here. Scroll on down to the on click. We need to add the actual script with the button, which if you remember, that's on the player. So let's drag and drop the player into here. Go to this one here, find the script, and do the play game. Awesome. All right, perfect. So far so good. Don't forget to save. If you are enjoying the course and you would like to continue, you must become a member of Red Fool's Academy at redfoolstudio.com/academy. You will not only get access to this course, but all of our premium courses. On your first sign up, you get 7 days free, money back guaranteed. See you in the lectures.